Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 on a Tuesday morning. We are recording. This is the time of day when we pull a random object out of the Random Object Randomogrifier. That's a toy out of a toy box. I have about 500 of those, so we can do a different one every day for a couple of years and never do the same one twice. Let's spritz these watercolors and make sure they're nice and juicy for later. Today we have a flour sack. And my daughter asked a very pertinent question yesterday. She said, how are you going to make a flour sack interesting? I'm like, well, for one thing, it is indeed a random object. We are going to make it interesting. It's got its own special set of challenges. What I really like about it, though, is there's not a whole lot of detail about it because it's really just a square with a top. And because of that, it should go rather quickly. And because this is a Tuesday, I think that she held this out for me to make sure that I had it on a Tuesday. Because she knows that I have a meeting at my day job on Tuesdays every week that I can't miss. And so I think when she was selecting the toy, this came out and she said, you know what, Daddy needs this on a Tuesday. And she's not wrong. That is a very astute child. She's about to be 20. I mean, I guess that's still kind of, it's not a child, but she's about to be 20. I heard she was very ornery. She is very ornery. She tempted me with ice cream, Dad. Dad's in the chat room talking about how ornery this child is. She tempted me with ice cream. And I succumbed. It's good ice cream. She's in. You would never attempt? That is what the definition of temptation is. She's in the ear saying, I would never tempt you. All I did was hold it out in front of you and you took it. That is the definition of temptation. I presented you with something you shouldn't have and suggested that it would be all right for you to have it. And then she encouraged me to stay up late. She's a bad influence. I was all like, I need to go to bed. She's like, no, stay up late with me. How's the sound this morning? I have different microphones set up. I think maybe it might make it a little better. I need to know though because I can't hear what's going on unless I run a recording here in the studio and play it back, and I can't do that while I'm talking to you at the same time. So I don't know how it comes across. Look at there. We already have the composition phase done. We're 5 minutes in the show. We already have the composition phase done, and we haven't even begun to talk about flour sacks. I tried to call my parents last night. I tell you what, let's start with why there are flour sacks and how they came to be. You know, we've had flour we've had wheat and stuff for thousands of years, and then we ground wheat into flour to bake bread. We've done that for a couple of thousand years, and until the 1800s, we transported flour around, mostly for long distances. Mostly we transported around in the same wooden barrels that we carried black powder around in. And the reason being is because, just like black powder, flour has to be kept dry, or it will mold and rot. And for centuries we used sacks to handle it around the mill, but for centuries, for transport, we would put it in barrels for transport for long distances so we could keep it dry. And then there's a shift in the 1800s where all of a sudden we see the rise of the flour sack, of the cloth sack replacing the barrels. And you know, it was kind of an interesting shift. When I was reading it, the first thing I thought is, well, why did we go from the barrels to the cloth sacks? And I thought, well, I wonder if that has anything to do with transportation. And sure enough, during the time period we're talking about, there's the shift from slow transportation of sailboats, sail-powered vessels trying to go across the ocean, taking months to get across the ocean or weeks to get across the ocean. And then you've got people making their westward expansion across the United States and other parts of the world too. But you've got people making westward expansion across the United States, and the only way to do it is through wagon train and mule packing, and that takes a very, very long time. And you're exposed to the elements with all the rain and stuff. And so you had to keep your flour dry at that point. But transportation changed. We developed steamships to get across the ocean. We developed trains to get across the plains, and we developed wagons and trails and villages along the way, if you will. And so, as all of that developed, we had ways to keep the flour dry beyond just keeping it sealed up. And what that meant is that we could get rid of that heavy barrel and start using flour. So the switch from barrels to the flour sacks is almost entirely due to the fact that we had so many advances in transportation. I find that to be fairly interesting. Of course, I'm easily impressed. See how fast this is going? It's crazy. That's crazy. The settlers would take the cloth bags, the 50 and 100-pound bags. The 100-pound bag really became the go-to, and the reason being is because, you know, you had to go all the way into town to get it, and so you didn't want to get. You couldn't just get 5 pounds. You didn't know how long it was going to be before you got back to town. And so they would get a 100-pound sack, and of course they had to use it. So they used it up in just about everything they did. That's why pancakes became such a staple for breakfast, because they had to use up their flour. They couldn't. Their flour would go bad, and the mice would be attracted to it. So they had to keep it stored, and they had to use it up quickly. And of course, then that meant they had to go back and get more. So they would take that 50 to 100-pound bag, usually a 100-pound bag. They would take that back, and they would use the cloth off of that bag for everything: towels, diapers, work shirts, quilts. They made quilts. There's a lot of quilts around made out of, subtle hint, there's a lot of quilts around made out of flour sacks. Let me dry this before we start adding some color to it, because I want to make sure that the underpainting doesn't activate. So anyway, they would use the flour sacks to make their clothes and make their stuff, and they would take the sacks. The sacks had their labels. Pillsbury, gold medal. The sacks had their labels printed on them, the flour companies. So the people would take their flour sacks, and they would boil them to get that label off. They would treat them with lye soap to get that label off. And lots of people would walk around in flour sack shirts with bleached out labels. But fast forward 100 years to the Depression, and you've got people walking around. You've got people who in town with no money to buy clothes. They have to make the decision to buy clothes or buy flour, and since they have to eat, they went for the flour. And you got all these little girls and boys walking around in flour sacks with labels on them. The companies, Pillsbury, gold medal, those are the most prominent. They caught wind of this and started printing flour prints on their bags, so that the families could have pretty clothes. The girls could have pretty dresses. So not only did they print the fabric with flour prints to make sure that the girls had pretty dresses, but they would partner with companies like the Calls, and they would make sure that their prints made it onto the pictures of the dress patterns so that the little girls didn't feel bad. They felt like it was supposed to be that way. I may have just made that worse. They wanted the little girls to feel like it was supposed to be that way, and so they would partner with companies like Bacall's to get the. I don't remember if it's Bacall's or McCall's. Somebody let me know in the chat or in the comments whether it was Bacall's or McCall's. But they would partner with them to make sure that the prints for the dress patterns would have the same flower print that was on their flower sacks. And they would sometimes print the dress patterns on the flower sacks. Let's see, they started printing their labels, the Pillsbury and gold medal labels. They started printing them in water soluble ink so that they could just be washed right out, and it wouldn't be a struggle to clean up after the fact. And so the people could get the labels off of them easier. And I was going to talk to my parents last night because I doubt my mother. My dad's like twice as old as my mom. I doubt my mother. It's funny. McCall's, not McCall's. I don't know how much exposure my mother had to flower sack dresses, but I bet my dad saw some flower sack dresses in his part of the world. And so I was going to ask them last night. Maybe they'll let us know in the chat how prevalent it was, because they're from rural Oklahoma, which is about 10 at the time was about 10-20 years behind the whole rest of the country. So they might have actually lived this experience. Today, my mom says today there are fabric designers that replicate the flower sacks. The fabric is a favorite of today's quilters. Yeah, it was good, sturdy quilt. It was good, sturdy material. Dad said his shirts were made from flower sacks. I figured it was something like that, and I wanted to talk to you last night about it, Dad. But the coolest thing to me was not only did Pillsbury and them step up to gold medal step up to do this, but they actually competed for the flower prints. The prints got so pretty that the women would compete who had the prettiest dress from the prettiest flower print. They had competitions every year to see which one was most popular. They had kind of a trade war going on because of it. And it's I just think it's fantastic that they stepped up to take care of their customers like that. It was a great marketing ploy because we're still talking about it today, almost 100 years later. I didn't think you had any experience with it, Mom. And I don't mean that to be tacky. I just didn't think you did. She's too young. You fast forward to the 1950s, and you've got Marilyn Monroe posing in magazines, and some designers, some critics said the only reason she looks pretty at all is because she's got the flashy clothes and makeup. And so the studio said, well, how about we do this? And they put her in a flower sack with no print, just a flower sack, and cinched up the sides like a dress. And minimal makeup, took pictures, and it went to 400 different newspapers and became an overnight success, a viral success around the country. cementing Marilyn Monroe in our minds forever as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. And I just think that's beautiful. This day went entirely too fast. That I could sit here and keep messing with that, but I would just be overworking it. So all I could do is sign it, and we're 10 minutes early. So what do we do for the next 10 minutes? I've never really had a show end 10 minutes early before. I think I was excited to talk about the flour sacks. I think I was excited to talk about Marilyn Monroe wearing the flour sacks. What is today? 24th? Let's see what it looks like from all the different perspectives. I think that's I don't think I've ever finished this early. So hang on a second. Let's see it. Let's see it from. I can tell you can tell that I tried to turn it into a female form. I might have been thinking a little bit too much about Marilyn Monroe. But let's see it. Let me show it to you from my perspective. I can also tell you that figure artists use flour sacks and pillowcases to learn to draw the human torso. And you'll see why here in just a second. I mean, it should be fairly obvious to you, but I may have shifted perspective a couple of times. But, oh yeah, I shifted perspective. But we use it because you can drop the sack down, and one side will be bent in, and the other side will have the outside shape. So it gives you the C shape of the human torso. We use it all the time. I was probably thinking about Marilyn Monroe when I drew this. So let's see what we have for tomorrow. Girl 2 has already pulled the toy for tomorrow. So we have, it looks to be a skeleton of some sort. It is a pirate skeleton with probably a sack of gold of some kind. There's some ball shot laying around in front of him, and a barrel of, oh, you can't even see what I'm doing. I'm going for that camera, and I've already switched to this camera. It's a pirate skeleton. He's got some ball shot laying in front of him. I don't know what's in his sack. Gunpowder, gold, food, who knows, bread, biscuits. And he's got a barrel of either wine, or whiskey, or gunpowder. Could be any of the three. So that's what we'll be drawing tomorrow. And so, guys, thank you so much. If you're watching this, first off, if you're watching this at before 5:30 on Wednesday morning, we're about to get into this right now. So just stick around for a few minutes, and we'll get right into it. But as I'm filming it on a Tuesday morning, it's what we're going to do tomorrow. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me. You know, I look forward to this every morning. This is how I maintain my accountability for my art practice, and I get to come down here and play with my besties. And almost half my family is in the chat room, so that's fantastic. Anyway, be sure and tune in tomorrow. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because that is how we know that the lag is caught up with the stream, and it won't be cut off in mid-sentence, and we'll be able to jump right out without worrying